the first thing I wanted to talk about, like everybody's worried about these students and what we're going to do with them. And they're just as worried as we are. I sent out that little message from Zach Rose. He's the president of their AOAO. And he has some concerns, a couple things. One, the universities, as far as I know, and as far as Zach knows, do not have any alignment for an opening date with the AOA because it's going to vary so much state to state. And so that's the one thing he can assure me, that our university here in Kansas City, they said no until further notice. They haven't even given us a date. So I'm sure that's going to vary from place to place. The other thing is hospitals in each city. Some of them still are on stay-at-home orders for a lot of people. And we're here stay at home till May 15th in Kansas City. So the students will be coming in anyway. But some of the things that he talked about, and maybe in a minute, Mark and Tim can chime in as well from the cord talk. But for the people that have had scheduled rotations, say if you have one in June already set up, and they still can't come in for some reason.
Can everyone mute their phones, please?
Yeah, if there's a lot of static. I'll just mute you guys and then I'll let you unmute you.
That's great.
Anyway, back to the students again. The students, Zach said a couple things. If they have a rotation, say in June at your facility, and they still cannot come for some reason, he had a couple ideas. One, they could give lectures and present some type of lecture to the faculty and the residents during the lecture time. I thought that was great. He said they would be willing and able to join any WebEx, Zoom conferences, whether they're fracture conferences or your lecture conferences, and at least they could participate that way, and you can ask them questions as well. He thought about still, if there is surgeries going on at your facilities, potentially some of the things they could do is, if they knew what surgery it was, you could assign them a task of going over the anatomy, reviewing that, the basics of the procedure, and then after a surgery, you could have once or twice during the week, one of the residents kind of quiz them on that and just grade them, see how they do, and that can get back to the faculty as well. And then intermittently throughout that rotation, if they're still not there, several faculty can do mini interviews with them, and that way they get to know them a little bit better and ask them other questions about themselves. So that was most of the questions. Let me double check. Yeah, that was it. And then I didn't know if individual places had some ideas, or Mark or Tim, do you want to give any update from the cord side of this?
Mark Tresiak. I don't know if Tim's on. Is Tim on?
Yeah, Tim's on too.
Okay. Yeah, the CAC, Cord Academic Committee, that's was Monday night, the Zoom thing. And then I talked to Mel Harrington, who is at Baylor, and he kind of explained all the stuff. Like Tim said in our program director listserv, they have a slightly different setup than we do. So according to Mel Harrington, the medical students, the MD students, will be able to rotate at their home institution. So like Baylor med students will be able to rotate through Baylor orthopedics. But they also have it like Baylor, they get to go out, and other MD schools come in to rotate. The talk right now is to stop all that, but I think they're gonna kick that can down the block a little bit. And there was talk of talking to the AAMC, which is the American Association of Medical Colleges, and the actual NRMP to push the date back. And that seems to be the direction, at least tentatively, that they're going to look at, to maybe push back the match date. And then that will give us more time to have these guys rotate. So I don't know how that affects the MD guys. What you were saying earlier, Chuck, I think that was Chuck, with the students, I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I mean, I don't know how you're going to, maybe I'm just not the guy to do that, but I don't know how you're going to have all that happen during a rotation. But if we could push it, like right now we have, like most people have starting in June, but I think the medical schools, and I don't know if Lee can comment, I don't know if the osteopathic medical schools are going to pull the students. So there's twofold. There's the MD medical schools that are stopping the students from traveling, and then there are the institutions that are accepting outside rotators, and that sounds like that may last till October. But Lee or anybody in the audience, I don't know, I didn't really verbalize it, but most of our rotators are out rotators, right? They're all 100% of osteopathic people, except for a few schools, are rotating out, like in audition rotations. So I don't know if the osteopathic medical schools have decided to put a ban on that.
And I would
What's the
Mark,
information?
Right, and in listening to that, and that was sort of what I'm bring up tonight to piggyback onto what you're saying before maybe even Lee speaks is, that's all of our, I think most all of us, I can't speak for everybody, is we get all outside students. I mean, we don't have the same setups as they do. And when they're talking about delaying all out rotations until October and then crunching everything in, and maybe even only allowing residents to do 2 out rotations during October to, say, January, pushing back NRMP. The problem is with NRMP being pushed back, and this is what I said last night too, is there's a lot of state that when you get the match, then they have to go through a huge credentialing process in California and whatever, that very, very difficult to get the residents credentialed in that state for the ability to start day one. So there's a lot of things that even looking at pushing back NMRP and RMP to that point. But our students are already scheduled, and I'm sure all of yours are, starting in June or July. Our internal institution is not limited.
Tim, I'm sorry, not to interrupt you, but are they, even though they're scheduled, I'm not sure if they're going to allow them to rotate. Some things that came offline from that after that meeting is some of the talks at the medical school level is if they send a student out to an area, especially like high impact areas like New York, and they get COVID, I think there's a worry that the students may sue them for sending them. So I think they're clamping down. But I mean, we have rotators scheduled in June. I just don't know if they're actually going to happen. That's my question. Tim, you have any insight, or anybody?
No, that's true. But the thing is, when you say, okay, if somebody from a Kansas school is going to go to New York City to rotate, if they say, well, we're only going to have 2 out rotations, and they go to New York, and then they go to California, to your place next. Well, they say, well, they're from Kansas, so they're not from a high potential city, but they just rotated at New York. So I think to try to clamp down on how many rotations, I think it was a sort of a good meeting to sort of hear all the opinions. I don't know where they're going to go with it, and I didn't hear anything more. You heard that afterwards. I haven't heard anything more of a definitive answer from that. Obviously, they're going to have this town hall meeting with all the program directors. But, and I don't know where this could lead, is do we in the osteopathic world follow a different set of rules? Because, I mean, how many MDs matched or how many DOs matched in the MD programs last year? Was it 3, I believe? We do have a totally different set of rules that we go by, and we do things a lot differently. And getting these students to rotate through, relying not just on a pool of applicants, here's 500 applicants, look through their information and pick a couple that you might want to have as your residents. We rely on your rotation, your interaction with staff, your interaction with other residents, your ability to work hard, what makes you a good person. And that's how we choose. And if we do this and go from October to November and follow their rules, we're going to lose out, I think, significantly on this. Obviously, the main point here is safety. I understand that. But there's a lot to really comprehend and what to do in this situation.
This is actually a two-way street. Because number one, we have the institution that we work with that says, are we going to take rotators? And we have the medical schools that say, are we going to allow the rotators? And so we need to have something a little bit more central that works to our benefit to say to the medical schools, we're open. And so we need to talk to our institutions. Are they going to allow people in? And we need to work on the national level, the medical school level, to say, can you let students come here? This is what we'll give. And I do know, because I'm on risk management committee in terms of malpractice and so forth, some states are already addressing that issue as to how are we going to handle malpractice and responsibility for allowing people to rotate and to do things regarding the COVID virus.
Yeah,
So
I know for our institution, we actually, our county, Broward, which is one of the hot counties in Florida, one of the 2 hot counties in Florida, it's Dade and Broward County. We actually have had a decline over the last 4 days in cases. I think shutting down the port and shutting down and restricting the airport like they did really made a huge difference. And we've had stay at home for, I don't know how long now, but it seems to be working. And we're starting to look at potentially reopening some of the elective stuff and so on over the next 14 days out. We're looking and saying, okay, we need to give ourselves 14 days to make sure that the trend continues down. Now, one of the things that just happened this afternoon is that if you are thinking about going to New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, LA, you have to expect, if you're going to come back, you have to quarantine for 14 days before you can come back into the hospital. So they're looking at and saying, hotspots, you can't even come back into the hospital unless you're quarantined for the 14-day period and then test negative. Okay, so if we have kids from hotspots places, you know, our hospitals are going to say, what are we doing? We're not, how could we let these people in with any good conscience when we need to realistically think about quarantining them for a 14-day period of time? Now, do you say to the kids, you know, you have to stay home for 14 days, you have to have a physician's affidavit that you stayed home, but then they get on an airplane where there's nobody on the plane anyway and potentially get exposed and then come into your facility? There is no answer. I mean, I know all of us have had lots of inquiries. I know that our NSU kids have been chomping at the bit and are saying they want to start rotating in June. And I haven't heard one way or the other from our school, from NSU, what they're planning on doing, which is, I'm not surprised, but it's what's happening. But you know, it's very, as you said, it's a slippery slope because it can hurt us both directions.
Hey, Joel,
This is Brent. Oh, go ahead.
Hey, just real quick, Joel. Let me see if Rob Harris from Jack Houston has anything from Georgia, because their state's open too, and maybe he's got something new going on down there.
Well, our state really isn't open yet. I mean,
Okay.
except for Jacksonville Beach.
Okay.
So this is Brent.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, with dealing with it, I'm sure most of you guys are leaders within your communities and dealing with Kettering Health Network and, you know, doing the postponing of surgeries and looking at things. And we will have absolutely no control over this. The schools will have control. This group will not be able to have control over, like, saying something that's different. However, the first comment that was made about doing some type of video thing for the osteopathic schools may be the best thing we could do. That's how we could do something. We're not going to be able to influence somebody coming into the state. We've got CRNAs coming back from New York, and it's just now, but they're coming back from New York, and we want to ramp up surgeries, and they're like, no, you have to sit for 14 days. So I don't think our institutions are going to allow it. The schools are worried about liability. I mean, you can just go down the thing. So this group will not have control over those institutions, but this group may be able to come up with a new plan to do a virtual rotation.
Right.
I don't know.
And
some of the things that Tim said is, what do we look at it? We just did for the last thing, and then love comments, is we did a virtual hand fellowship interview. I think I'm going to do it forever. It was the best interview process we've ever done. It was very, very interesting. Everybody was engaged. So maybe what Tim's saying is take the things that what we look for in a person, can we actually develop a virtual rotation? I don't know.
I know that the Student Osteopathic Association, as you said earlier at the very beginning, is actively trying to figure this out. I know one of our incoming residents is one of the past presidents, and she actually talked to me yesterday, what's today? Tuesday, yesterday, about how we can become engaged and lecture to the students. And I think we all need to look at that and say, we need to figure out how we all can participate, especially since we have the platforms of either Zoom or WebEx, depending on your hospital and so on, that we can get this set up. I mean, we all have done it with our residency programs. Some of the attendings have technical issues, but we can all figure this out. And we have lots of lectures for the medical students that we can do for them and help them and make it interactive, as you said, so that we can figure out how we can do this as the interviewing, at least part of the interviewing process.
Is that Joel and Brent? This is Mark Kuzak. I agree with what you're saying. The one thing I learned from that court is maybe this group, and I agree with Brent saying we're not going to have control, but maybe we should do a policy. So like if we agree that every program's going to do a virtual, whatever it was, a virtual rotation, we should be uniform. Maybe we say we don't take rotators in June, and I'm just spitballing here, but we do take rotators starting in August and look at that. But I think the one thing I learned is we should probably do it as a group. So I think that was Joel talking about the medical students. So then we could put out a concerted, coordinated program director thing instead of all the hearsay that goes on both in the MDs and DOs, right? This is what osteopathic program directors for orthopedics say. We're gonna start we're gonna start rotations tentatively in August, and if you want to rotate before that, you do a virtual, or we're gonna do a virtual a virtual interview, or whatever, and we can come up with that. But I think the interesting thing would be to settle upon some sort of coordinated process that we all do. And I don't know what that is exactly. I think there's bits and pieces in there of everybody's ideas, right?
I think
why don't we consider?
I would think you would get other people that would get involved. I think you could garnish Wright State in this area. I think you could garnish, Cleveland Clinic. You could garnish other people, and probably in your area.
Ohio.
So, but all of Ohio could do something.
No, but I'm suggesting this. If we decide that we need residents, and really and truly, our program did a study, and audition rotations are very important. So what if we decided that we make a recommendation, if a student wants to do a rotation in our hospital, that we would recommend that they sign up, and for 2 weeks before they come to our rotation, they do a virtual rotation, come and work for 2-4 weeks or whatever, and then go back and then understand that they have to do an after, and we give them an after test or whatever. Because I think that's really the idea, is we want to protect our patients, our hospitals want to protect, and if we come to the medical schools and say, this is what the requirement is. If you want to do a rotation, you got to spend a little bit of time before doing some virtual stuff, doing some study, then you can come and do stuff, because really the idea that we see them and see how they work and how they interact with our residents and our program is probably the most important thing in the osteopathic residents.
Yeah. Fremont, I think your thing is perfect. We just change the media and change the environment. The environment used to be you had to be face to face. Now it's virtual, and actually they're a lot better. They're a lot better than that.
Do virtual and then come
for my picture.
Yeah, do virtual and then come for some time and spend some time, and then afterwards you got to trail off and do something different.
Routinely these rotations are. This is Joe Daniel. I'm sorry. In our program, these rotations are usually 4 weeks in length. So what what we have decided to do is to do a minimum 2 weeks of a virtual rotation, as was mentioned, and then to cut that on-site rotation block down to 1 week, where we know who you are. We've been doing virtual work with you. You've been participating in our academics, our grand rounds, etc. You come and we give you 7 days with us, and it decreases the exposure time. We already have your history. We know how you interact with each other. But I think the comment.
Have you done it, Joe? Have you done it yet?
No, but this is what we're planning on doing. This is the outline.
That's cool. That's
It's
awesome.
good, because it's the idea. You do the virtual, you get an idea, then you look at the people. I know it's a lot of things, but it really does give them a better chance, and us a much better chance to sell it to the universities and to our hospitals.
I agree. And I think, and this is only one man's opinion, truly, but I think there should be an agreement amongst the PDs as to how much time we're gonna consider having these guys on the ground, not only for their safety, but for our patient safety, and just for uniformity of a rotation block. So, and it certainly doesn't need to be decided tonight, but if we all decide, you know what, you're gonna come to Brett's program for 10 days to 2 weeks, then it should be 10 days to 2 weeks for all programs across the board, just for a uniform design. That's all.
So
I would just say one thing. I think everybody on this call needs that student on their service for about 4 hours. But how they interact with the residents, it takes longer. So if we can make the residents the virtual part, I mean, I don't need people more than, that's what I'm saying. And I think everybody here has the experience that they can pick people out, understand first impressions work. But yeah, if we could work out a deal, I think.
what if we do this? What if we require that the student come for a period of time, but when they show up the first day or before, they get a test? They be tested for COVID-19 to make sure. So that lets our institution know that these guys are coming, or these women and these kids are coming, that they're negative to begin with. And maybe
I think that's going to be dictated anyways.
Well, it
The
may be.
hospitals and the schools are going to be dictating that to us anyways.
That's fine, but that's okay. We put that in part to our program, saying they have to be COVID negative to come. They could do a week virtual. They could come to the area for a week. They don't even necessarily have to be in the hospitals. They could work in our office, or they could work even in their apartment or wherever their housing is, just to be locally involved, then do a week or whatever on the floors, and then they.
So this is Fred Schreiber for a minute. So I think that the suggestions I'm hearing sound great. I think the concept of coming up with a pattern and some virtual and some on-site is great. But the concept that you're going to be able to test all these kids, it's going to have to be dramatically different than we have it right now. Because my hospital for the next 45 days has a total of 1,000 tests they can run. That's it.
But it's the hospital. It's the school. It's the school.
So you're hoping that the school has access to the test,
Yes.
but nobody in the country has access to the test.
Listen, in the city of
So
Detroit,
hold on, guys, hold on.
Okay.
Testing. This is Brent. Sorry. Testing is a big drama across deciding on surgeons open. We're never going to be able to figure out on this call. And I'm sorry. This makes perfect sense that we develop, like Mark said, we as a group develop the new rotation. That's essentially what we're doing. And so however we can do that, I think it's a great idea. But the testing is, we can't argue on this. I've been arguing with it all day. So.
Hey, Brett, one of the other, this is
Brent, are you saying against, because I agree with, if you're the person, I don't know everybody's voice, but what happens if you test the student, they're negative, and then they go to the next rotation, they're positive? So
no, that's what my point is. The face-to-face, the face-to-face way never happened. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen here because the government, I mean, the states are going to say something, institutions are going to say something, and then we're going to have false negatives of 20, false positives, false negatives, they're all going to happen. If the testing really comes, we're going to have a problem. But I'm saying, I go back to what Mark said and what Dr. Daniels said, is essentially figuring out a new rotation. And because we have a common thread here, let's figure this out.
Wait a minute, we're the
kind of fun.
institution. We need to set the standard.
Yeah,
Well, I think-
you guys
So
can't set a
everybody-
standard for testing.
Like a virtual and a real. Is that right? So, I mean, maybe we could just start Brent and whoever, everybody else. It seems like everybody is saying, and we could start that way. This is again, Mark Treziak. If we all agree there's going to be a virtual and a real, like on site, then that's a starting point, right?
Yeah.
Like Brent said, we're making it up.
Yep.
Does everybody agree to that, or do we have people that don't and bring up the points? Because that's the starting point, and then it's just how much time for each. I think. Yeah.
Hey guys, this
overly
is
idea.
Mark. This is Chuck. We got 28 program directors on this call. So one thing is, let's come up with a survey monkey, see who's interested in doing this, virtual / then a 1 or 2 week rotation, however we want to do it. First, see who's interested, because we do have to kind of be a uniform thing if we're going to try to do that. And then we'll tackle out how to do it. That'd be the second step. But I think
Before we do that, Chuck,
Yeah.
we need to get with the medical schools and see what they're going to consider a rotation, because these aren't ours. These are med students.
That's correct.
I know, but they have, they're lemmings.
Yeah, they have no.
We
They
need
have
to
no
tell them what orthopedics
Right.
rotations are going to be in the year 2000.
Yeah,
20, or
this
wherever
is-
the hell we are.
this
I
is-
lost
this
a
is-
few years.
This is Wade Ferber. I agree with Brent completely that we need to create this, and we need to throw it at the medical schools, because they're not going to have this thing organized from their standpoint, and there's not going to be uniformity in the medical schools in their decision making. So if we
Medical
set a
schools don't
standard,
care.
I
Medical
understand that, but
schools
we
just
still
want a
need to
graduate student.
set a standard from what we all choose as what we're going to consider.
I think-
Hey guys, it's
So
Joel.
Charles,
Yeah.
this is Brent. Just one thing. Would you mind if I work with Dr. Daniels and anybody else who wants to get together to brainstorm on a virtual rotation?
Happy to help.
That's it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
I think
So he and I will take care of a virtual rotation, because I'm not doing any surgery, which sucks. But I mean, so we move on from there. We can do that, and then do the survey monkey, and whoever else is interested. And we need some. I'm going to reach out to all my younger residents. That'll probably break this thing in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
But if you don't mind doing that, is that okay?
No,
Brent,
I'm happy to help. Brent, I have a question for you. A comment was made earlier about reaching out to some of the allopathic institutions. Would you rather that we work on this from an osteopathic standpoint first and establish how we define a virtual rotation, or if there's, as you mentioned, 1 day on the ground or 5 days on the ground in person, if that's possible, and then go back to, I think we all have sister institutions that are allopathic. I have Jefferson.
Yeah.
I am sure they have not thought this far in advance.
No. My point was this: is that it's inclusive versus exclusive. However, we need to have control before you bring them in.
I agree. I think that's a good
And
idea.
then, so I just think we stay where we are, but then this is the next presentation that happens as core as we take it over.
Right.
Oh, did I say that out loud? Sorry.
No, I think that's appropriate. Is that we are one organization now, but I think we need to set the pace for this.
Wait a minute.
I
We're not one
think it's-
organization,
Brent,
because most of the osteopathic profession, most of the osteopathic programs rely on addition rotations. That we did that study. It's been published. And the problem is, if we don't look at these people, because they sometimes, I've found with people that have rotated with us, they look pretty good to some of the attending physicians, but the residents point out all the inequalities. They say, these guys are showing off for you, and they're not. And so I think it's really important to, if we can, to try to bake in some time on the ground with us.
Agreed.
Guys, it's Joel. I think the idea is really sound. What I think we have, besides our residents, as Brent said, are really smart, and they can very much help this, because listen, they're so close to being in that position. But we also have the other group of the student osteopathic group that is actively trying to figure out how to make it so they can be seen and they can get positions. And I think they would be very willing and able to, and they've already reached out to find out what they can do to make themselves available and help the process. So I think we also need to, as we structure this, Brent, I think we need to reach out to that organization, because it's a cross-section of what the schools are doing and what input they can provide as to what the schools are doing, so we can, make this work for everybody.
Hey, Doug.
I agree with you. Just one comment is, they can get in trouble. If they try to push their school, they can get in trouble. But I do think that their input needs to be done. It's like, what are they going to do to us? Not much.
Right. No, I agree with that. But they're in the thick of it. And
no, I agree.
It's not necessarily pushing their school. It's just a matter of information about the process and what's going to work for everyone on both sides to make it happen.
Hey, Doug, you had a chat question or something?
He's muted.
I tried to unmute him.
Hey, this is Tommy D. Can I ask a question? I'm sorry, I came late about
No.
15 minutes.
No, you can't.
No, move on. No.
So at MSU, they're not talking about opening up classes, and medical students are not going to be leaving or doing anything. So they're planning on everything being virtual until the fall. So, I mean, we have to have a possibility that this will not have any on-site kind of rotations, but it's got to be potentially all virtual. But then when things do open up for the travel, then it can be more than that. But right now, these discussions are looking really into the fall before this is going to be opened up.
So,
and it's in our control.
Go ahead.
Well, that was going to be my questions. Do you guys have is there any uniformity across all ACOMAS and all the osteopathic schools as far as when they're going to send her back? Now, like, we got a notification, the last time I heard from PCOM was, May 14th or May 11th or something like that. And in our state, I have a feeling we're going to start an opening, that's going to happen. So just like they're saying, every state's going to be different.
Yeah.
Every city and hospital is going to be different. And if a certain school is in that state, they may have variations as well based on those state laws and the state openings. So some states may open up. Some of the schools out in Arizona, their students are going to probably be allowed to go and rotate, but they may not be allowed to come and rotate in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's still shut down. It's not our hospital that threw the students out. In fact, I think it's stupid that they aren't here. My understanding, it was a liability and a fear from the medical schools as to the potential risk to their students and who would protect them and where would the liability fall. So our hospital didn't say, hey, you have to leave. It was all the medical schools that were sending their students to us that pulled all their students back. And they are doing virtual rotations.
I think that's
right
partly
now.
true, but some of the institutions have said no, even for our residents. So maybe that's like a number one thing we should do, is be sending notes to the medical schools and saying, what's your policy? And then the institutions that we work with, what is going to be your policy? Are you going to let students in? Because my institution says no right now, but so we need to work on that ground level to get.
Yeah, our institution's reluctance of medical students had more to do with the availability of PPE for those, and they didn't want those students utilizing PPE. So our students went more observatory, but at least they were face to face and, somewhat. And then, of course, now we're mostly virtual too. But
So
when things start opening up, my state may do something totally different than what happens in Florida, say. I don't know. I don't know that we can create.
Hey, Brent,
I think what Doug said about Michigan, and it may, Modesto may be the same way. you may not get any students to come out of there. I think we go full virtual and drop back to the conversation of can we figure out a full virtual rotation?
The other thing, guys, is
Brent?
hang on. It's the other thing,
This
guys.
is Vanderlook. Can I say something?
Yeah, Lee.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think I've been listening to this conversation. I think it makes sense to do like Brent says. This year, just do 100% virtual, because if we open it up later in the year, then those applicants may have an advantage being face to face. I think maybe for this year, totally virtual, and then just reassess. You know, that we may want to stay virtual, but have some face to face at some other time. But there's so many unknowns. I think we could spend weeks just trying to figure out what the medical schools are going to do, and then the day after you talk to them, they're going to change their mind. So I think a plan to go totally virtual this year makes so much sense, and I think the students would love it.
I think if anyone is part of the VSAS or VSLO system, they're actually shut down until the end of April, at least as of right now.
That's what I heard. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're actually just finishing up contracting with them, but they're shut down. They're not even doing anything. So they're not looking to schedule rotations. They're not accepting applications. They're on hold permanently until, you know, things change. So there's a push from every direction to prevent, God bless you, from preventing the students from getting out there and creating a potential liability and a dangerous situation where they can get sick.
So can I make a suggestion? This is a suggestion. If Joe Daniels and Charles and then whoever in the committee, probably about 5 or 6, do some research and come back within, because I really think we need to do this in a very short period of time.
Yes.
Is come back within in 1 week with ideas and get this group back together.
Great.
And then you guys do your, whoever, because we can only yell at 4 or 5 people at a time.
Yeah.
But if we have 4 or 5
Good idea.
people, and then do your own due diligence and come back to us, then I think we could come up with something really cool. That's my thought.
This whole situation that we find ourselves in as PDs, it just so rings clear of what we're all going through with COVID. This is such a fluid environment that we're in, that we just have to be flexible and understand that we may be totally virtual this year, as was mentioned. We may have an opportunity to put people on the ground and to interview them through an audition in the future at some point, but we have to have these variables kind of worked out, and I'm more than happy to help with that.
Hey,
my last
But this is
sorry.
Dan. Hello?
So Dan, one second. Last comment is we have the ability as small programs that we don't have to go through layers. And I think that's why some of the university programs, that didn't let us get through, those university programs can't do this. So think of that. Thanks.
Dan, you had something to
Hey
say?
guys, this is
I think it's great that we can do this and be really uniform. I'm one of the black sheep. I'm on the outside. I'm the only orthopedic osteopathic program in an allopathic institution with 198 allopaths. So I have to go through the university, but the university is they love having orthopedics. They love having all the osteopaths. I would love if all the PDs got together and we got something very virtual, and with everyone's blessing, just throw this on the GMEC and say, this is how orthopedics and osteopathy is going to work.
Agreed.
I like that. I love that.
But
I love
after
that.
everyone, and that would shock not only the allopaths, but then it would sort of trickle through. But I wouldn't do anything without having the approval, but I also have to have approval through the university. But I think it would be a great thing for our programs.
You're the litmus test.
Good idea.
Charles wrote a chat about what happens if they're antibody positive. The problem is you really want to start, prioritizing or picking out people and making it the environment that it's like, oh, you're the privileged person because you've been sick and now you have antibodies. I think that goes against what we've we're trying to come up with here. It's a good idea, but I think in this case, it's not the right direction that we need to go as a uniform group of program directors.
Hey guys,
So there was a comment that Joel just said about there's just gonna be a pushback from the match. I will just tell you that like somebody was saying they took 5 years, my 4 years, and they were bitching about having Google meetings, which we had 15 people on. Now they think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. So that would be my pushback is they don't have a clue from the match. We're going to tell them how we do it.
Hey, Greg, you got something?
Yeah, real quick. For those of you program directors that sit on your graduate medical education committee, although it's early on, I would find out from your DIO or whoever your point person is, kind of what they're thinking and give some active input to them. And then secondly, those program directors that have affiliations with medical school, i.e. Brent, me, Joel, and others, Chuck, start talking to the medical schools and find out what it's going to look like before we roll it out completely, because we could come up with something completely one way and it'd be different. But I think the GME committee, there's active input because that thing is in flux right now. We haven't even had a meeting since this has all started. We have one coming up in the next couple of weeks, I think the 7th of May. But I think the more information we have going forward, we can report to the committee about what we're thinking going forward. And I think that would be a good idea.
So the only thing I'd say, Greg, is this to me would not be an ask. This would be a ask for forgiveness and show them a plan, sort of what Dan said.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to go ask OU or Kettering, but we're going to say, oh, by the way, we have this plan. By the way, we have this plan. As long as people are, because I think they would shut it down. I don't know, whatever.
Hey, Brent. Brent, this is Chuck.
Tommy D again. I got another quickie. So I think it's a great idea. I think there's great, like you said, great potential for this. I'm all for it, and I can, I'll reach out to my residents right away. Interestingly enough, my son is in the third year of meds, end of his third year. He's doing virtual OBGYN rotation right now. So and he's doing virtual, and he just moved into virtual psych. He said the OBGYN, the hands-on, what should have been a hands-on rotation.
Oh, don't even go
sucked.
there.
I'm just saying, he said it sucked. It was really terrible. Psychiatry, he's doing currently, and he's already said, hey, great opportunity. My other son is doing virtual counseling sessions all day long, just like we're doing video visits in the office. So, I think there's great potential for it, especially if you marry it up with some video interactivity, as well. But,
So if somebody else has done it, if someone else has done this, meaning OB, let's just steal it and make it better.
Well, it was just assignments of readings. That's all it was. Constant assignments, and then they would have.
No. We need interaction with residents. Interaction with residents.
Hey, Brent, this is Chuck again. Can we do two things? One, let's get on the listserv, see who's interested in being on this committee. That's the first thing. I think people need to think about it.
Good.
We want to have people that really want to do it and have motive to do it, which we all should. But then we'll get the thoughts together, and we can do another Zoom meeting if you want to do that. But let's first get this group together through that listserv, and then we'll come up with a really great virtual thing. I'm sure we can do it.
I agree with you.
Okay.
You guys already solved it. Truly. You just now got to put it together. I think that just listening to all that stuff, you've got it as a virtual rotation. And you got the best people so far that know technology to do it. So I know I was jumping the gun, Chuck. I apologize. I wanted to solve the problem, but you already solved it. Sounds like it's going to be a good virtual experience, and then you guys figure out how we do it. But would everybody agree that once Brent's committee or whoever's committee we're calling it does it, we should all jump onto that then, so that we're all uniform?
No, so if things lighten up and we're able to have people rotate. I think the concept of a combined virtual and a boots on the ground type rotation is the template that is the most appealing. I have a great deal of difficulty. Let's assume 3 months from now, everything's back to normal. I can tell you right now, my residents won't have time to do a virtual curriculum with students for the rest of the year. They are, you know, that's just not, our program is not designed that way, and our volume is such that they will not have time. Now, maybe we'll still be in a lapse like we are now, and they'll have plenty of time. But I have no way of knowing that. So I think the concept of partially virtual, partially on site is a very workable model.
So the other thing is this.
So Charles, I
Yes.
mean, just for,
Remember that this is a fluid situation, right? So I think what Fred said is absolutely true. It could be a lot different in 2 or 3 months. And so the fact if we're going to meet, we need to probably meet a little bit more regularly to keep this up. So going forward with a plan that says this is what we have to do in the situation, but we are willing to change if necessary, is the most ideal situation.
And for remember, this is Chuck again. Let's do what we just said. Let's get on that listserv, get a group together, because there's topics other people want to cover.
Sure.
And not spend all night doing this, which
No.
we've done a lot. But 2 more things that I've got chats people want to talk about: graduations and then the 2-year site visits. So we can talk about graduations if you want. Our facility is just going to do virtual. If we get released to come in and do a real graduation, that's what's going to happen. But for now, it's going to be virtual. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, Chuck, this is Wade. This is Wade Ferber.
Yeah,
We're gonna probably do. It looks like they're gonna start tailoring us down a little. So we're probably gonna have our golf tournament, which we do, and we'll probably, if they let us, just have the graduates themselves and the program in the room that we would have families and everybody else, and basically social distancing everybody to do it if it's possible.
are you going to do onesomes instead of foursomes?
Yes.
Everyone will have their own golf cart. I think with Broward, we're probably gonna wait to see. I mean, we're opening slow. It looks like we're gonna start opening up over the next 2 to 4 weeks. So we may be able to have some form of graduation, but we don't know. We still have it on the books, but we don't know exactly what we're doing.
It's all fluid, Joe. It's all fluid.
Yeah. It's all fluid.
Any other thoughts?
I mean, unfortunately for the residents, it'd be nice to have the big thing, but it's like, excuse me, it's like the medical schools. They're not having graduation. Talk about the end of a period of time that, transition in life, and they're not even having that, which if you ever sat through a graduation for 4 hours, thank God.
Yeah, if you guys looked on the core listserv, they talked about graduation too.
Right.
Different facilities are doing different things. I threw mine in there. Jackie threw hers in there. So, I mean, we're all trying to make it work, whatever that is this year round. I'm sure it'll be different later, but for now, I think it's really what your institution's going to let you do pretty much.
Right.
Next.
You guys want to jump on the 2-year site visits? I know there's people been through it already that might be able to help us out. And then the other thing is, if anybody went to ACGME, they did have slides about site visits. And if people do not have those, we can get those to people to look at the 2-year site things coming up. But I'd be happy to hear from any of the 2-year people who have been through it already.
I'll chime in to start. Broward, we did it last year sometime. I can tell you the amount of increased granular information they wanted was insane. They literally started to go line by line in the regs and say, where is this, where is this, where is this? For example, for us, it was goals and objectives. Initially, you have goals and objectives for juniors and then seniors. Our site visitors said, where's the goals and objectives for PGY1? Where's the goals and objective for PGY2 sports medicine and for pediatrics? And where are they for PGY4 pediatrics? Well, you didn't ask for that 2 years ago. Well, this year, now it's more specific. And they expect to have you answer the questions and give them a shitload more information than you ever can expect they want, and then some more on top of it. I mean, that's my experience, and I know Wade and Greg and a lot of other people have been through the 2-year visit, and it's a different ballpark, especially now that we're now 4 years or almost coming to 5 years into this, and I know for our program, and everyone sort of was trying to figure out how our program got through without general surgery the first time around, and it was more like, we don't know exactly what we're doing with these programs, but it looks like a good program, so we're going to give them that and see if they actually come up with general surgery in 2 years, which we did.
Okay, Greg, you want to chime in, Greg?
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, we went through the 2-year cycle as well, and ours was actually, believe it or not, the opposite of what Joel's was. We actually were fortunate enough to have the same examiner that we had the first time, and I was surprised because she sort of forgot that she had come there before and questioned, hey, haven't I been in this room before? We said, yeah. So we thought she was sort of confused a little bit. But point was, it was really funny.
I want that one.
Yes.
Right. Right. But the point was that she did go through a fair amount of detail and was not vindictive really at all. Still wanted to talk to the residents a lot more than she did before. But overall, everything went fine. And it wasn't that big of a deal. But as with all of these types of inspections, they are all over the map. And really, it depends on who your inspector is.
And I'm just gonna chime in on that our DIO said the person that came to do our inspection, and we've done I don't know how many inspections now through our residency programs. She said, our DIO said that this individual was the most microscopic and black and white that any inspector that has come to our facility was. And she was actually surprised how much detail she really wanted to see, which didn't make sense.
And the issue is that these inspectors then make a report to the RRC, which is who makes the decision. The inspectors just fill out the forms.
Right. Exactly.
From what I've heard, the most valuable thing I could get out of this is people gave me the name of the inspector, so I can front
exactly.
Yes. I'm serious. Yes. It's the one that came to Broward County. I'm going to do a lot more work.
Yes.
Well, I think Fred, this is Wade Ferber. I think I'm on toward the experience that Greg had more so, although the inspector that we had was pretty anal and she was very thorough. We just prepared for this thing to be a colonoscopy. And the bottom line was we had everything out there, including all our goals and objectives for every resident of every year of every rotation. And she wanted to speak to every attending and every resident that she could. And in the end, it's not up to her. She just sends in her paperwork, right. And it's the flavor of the RRC whether they look at your program and say, okay, we won't pick on them too badly. I think you guys got to be as ready as possible. That's what it comes down to.
Hey, Wade, this is Chuck and Joel and Greg. You guys have been through it with citations that you might have had. How did those go, or did you get new citations?
They did review those citations that we had before, and they weren't a problem. They had been addressed in writing, and then we did not really have any significant citations going forward.
We had
Go
we
ahead.
had a citation which was pretty disappointing to me. It was that my attending staff didn't fill out their the evaluation of the program appropriately, and they said that we need to have a better rating of the program from the attending staff. Everything else was, the only other thing that they cited us on again was with everybody was scholarly activity, and we have plenty of it. And now with the new requirements, it's not individually, it's the program itself, so that should help.
Yeah, we obviously had the warning because we didn't have general surgery. So general surgery is starting July 1, and they were notified immediately when we were got the general surgery program set up, and we came back with the continued the warning went away, but a lot of you know this, that the citation stayed because we couldn't show them that we had interaction with the general surgery residents because they weren't in the building yet. So we were still being cited for that. And they also didn't like that, yes, we had
Can Cochran talk about that?
And then the other continued citation was that, yes, we had a simulator, and yes, it was no longer in the resident call room, which would have been a lot more convenient for them, which is not allowed. But it was in the same room as another simulator, which was the MediMan, and we should have separate rooms for the simulators. That was a citation.
Really?
Come on. Really? It's called, I don't understand the nitpicking, and maybe at some point in time in my life, I'll get to understand that. But I don't know.
Joel, what was the outcome? Joel, what was the outcome of your the site visit?
I mean, we're continued accreditation without outcomes, just like all the other. Just like all the other.
So at least you moved forward.
That wasn't the issue. It's just you figure you'd like to get rid of the stupid citations, and they just keep making shit up.
They're bureaucrats.
They're cronies. I know, but it's bullshit. But I mean, at least you got moved forward.
Yeah.
They didn't say, oh, your continued initial accreditation and give you some new freaking category. You got continued accreditation with citations. Big deal. You work on them. It gives you something to do for the next 10 years during your self-assessment.
6 years, 5 years.
If I'm here for 10 years, well, there's something wrong with me.
No.
I'm saying,
you guys, without outcomes, it's not 10 years.
Right.
This is another sticking point with this bullshit. Excuse my French, but because the fact that you have a program that's been in existence for 20 years, you haven't been in the ACGME, therefore they can't, even though your residents going forward can sit for the ABOS, your program has no history with the ACGME, and therefore you only get 5 or 6 years, I believe, and then you have to get inspected again.
Well, like
has
anyone
heard about? We have our 2-year site visit coming up in New Jersey in July. We got accredited in 2018.
So do we supposedly in Dayton.
I believe I read something that all site visits are being delayed, obviously, until further notice. Has anyone heard this, or is that?
Yes.
That's correct.
Yes.
That is correct.
We've all heard that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Good.
Yeah. So is that true, or are they going to be virtual?
That would be good.
That's brilliant.
There was a possibility of that was suggested.
Yeah. So Joel, I have a question for you guys. I was told, some of you probably were at the CORD meeting. CORD went over the whole 10-year, self-assessment. My specific question is, when does the clock start? They said the minute you get continued accreditation, not continued accreditation with or without outcomes. They didn't even mention that. I will go back and reconfirm that with Pam Durstein. But does that mean, what are you supposed to do in the 5 years between if you're telling me you're going to get a site visit because you have without outcomes, what are you supposed to do during that time? More of the same.
Yep.
Okay.
She doesn't give a clear answer there, Tom. She just says they're coming back to inspect you at 5 years.
Okay.
See, I'm from New York, and we had the continued without outcomes, and they told us 10 years.
It's not true.
I can't wait to see what happens.
It's not
I
true.
want to know what happens. Yeah, I thought so.
I hope they don't come back in 5 years.
They are. They're gonna ram it right up your ass in 5 years.
I hope not.
I'll be due for another colonoscopy then.
There's a Clint from Oklahoma State Tulsa has that message out there for everybody sees that. They have an additional PGY1 spot for next year. Need to scramble by July 1 to get somebody. If you know anybody good, just throwing it out there for them. You can always contact them through the listserv, I'm sure. Any other topics you guys want to cover tonight? I know we definitely got to do that virtual thing, get that going, see who wants to participate in that. We talked about future topics for the next fall meeting, as that may be virtual, but hopefully it'll be in person. But if you got topics you want to throw out there, we got to get speakers for it, or if you know speakers, be happy to entertain that. I will probably have Ann Van Heest coming again. She was to present on the behavior resident tool, and Joe Westerhofer, he spoke with Mark out at his program in Modesto once, and he's going to come and talk too. So we got a couple people coming, and just invite other topics if you want them. Let me know.
Chuck, you're going to send out the Survey Monkey?
Can I ask two questions?
Sure, ask.
I think we actually had this answer before. With previous, our AOAO residents were required to do a senior paper. And I understand that's gone away. I think we had this discussion previously that can be a individual thing. What about the attendance at an annual meeting by the 5th year?
You there, Lee?
Yeah, I'm here. If you're not AOA accredited, you don't need to send them. We wish you would.
Okay.
We wish you would. To remain true to the osteopathic profession, it'd be nice to have the residents come and see what we're all about. But if you're not AOA accredited, it's not there.
Do what I do, and don't tell them that the residents don't have to go.
I didn't tell them that either. They asked me. So
I was just leave it in the budget and have to go.
Because it can be a program
you can
requirement.
have you.
It can be a program requirement, just like the paper.
Yeah.
Isn't it true that after June 30th, there's no longer an AOA accreditation, and then the whole AOAO case logs, the quarterly reports, the resident reports, all that stuff goes away?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. So that's not absolutely true, because there will be some programs that will not be ACGME accredited, possibly. And so the AOA
for the ones that
will still exist, and there will still be AOA requirements. But for the vast majority, there will not be.
Right.
Well, it's my PG1 residents are my only ACGME accredited residents. Every other one is AOAO. So the AOAO has an obligation to those residents for the next 4 years until they graduate, right?
Yep.
But
honestly, it's the AOA.
Yeah, the AOA will not be in the accreditation business at all after June 30, 2020, except for those programs that did not get initial accreditation with ACGME.
Right.
But
no matter which resident,
who is responsible for those AOA residents that are not considered ACGME residents, i.e., those that were in my program before we got initial accreditation?
AOA.
Right. So that carries on for I have 4 years worth of residents that are in that situation.
Right. So you got to do both for 4 years, Tommy. You got to do both for 4 years.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
No way. No way. They don't have to. because the AOA won't be in that
Yeah.
business after June 30th.
Right.
And neither will we, because we get our authority. The AOAO gets its authority from the AOA.
Then what happens?
Isn't the real question though, will the AOBOS allow those people who graduate those 3 or 4 classes to sit for their boards? If they can sit for the AOBOS without continuing to fill out their quarterly reports and all those things, and because we're no longer accredited by the AOA, they're fine. They finish the program under their current state, wherever it was when they started, but they sit for the AOBOS versus if they are under ACGME, they have the choice to sit for the AOBOS or the ABOS. Is that not right, Lee?
That is true. That is true.
So this is the last year for
And-
that then.
Yes.
Right. And the residents that are, you know, 3rd, 4th, 5th year under the ACGME system, the program director notifies AOBOS that their training complete. There's a system in the ACGME world to do that. We didn't ever use it because we didn't have any residents that wanted to take AOBOS. But in family practice, internal medicine, OB, it's been there for years and years and years. So there is a process in place. So they won't have to complete quarterly reports. The AOAO will no longer suggest that their program complete.
So
It'll be up to the
wait a
program
minute.
director to communicate directly with AOBOS.
So the bottom line is everybody moving forward has to take AOBOS, right? But who manages that data? ACGME?
Right.
Okay.
Hey, I'd like to make one comment relative to the conferences that Dr. Scott mentioned. I think, matter of fact, I just received a message from our hospital about what conferences we expect our residents to participate in. And I think it's up to the program directors to continue to remember that we want our residents at some point in the 5 years to go to the AOAO meetings so that we have them participating and supporting our organization. If we decide that they're going to go to the OTA, the Hand Society, the Foot and Ankle, all these other ones and exhaust their money supply, then we're going to lose out. So I'm going to put on my budget that it's expectation for them to still go to the AOAO meeting. Like some others said, you don't have to tell them, just make it a requirement. Yes. So that they still participate in the residents and fellows conferences, so we have the lifeblood. Because if they don't do that, it's just another way that they can just sort of not participate and contribute to our organization.
Right, so it's a nail in our coffin.
Right.
So what are you going to do with the programs that have mixed residents, like MDs and DO residents within the program? Are you going to require them to go to the osteopathic meeting? That's cool. I would love it.
Yes.
Well,
I could learn the other side.
You know what?
Listen,
as a program that has MDs, this Joel, I would love to have my 2 PGY2s go to the DO program because I think they can learn what being a more of a person is like.
They knew what they were signing up for.
And what collegiality is really like. So
networking. I'll hire 3 more MDs. It's not a problem.
Well, you can, one of the things we're doing, and you can do, everybody can do this, you are allowed to have a higher standard than what the ACGME minimum standard requirements are. If that means going to the AOAO meeting, so be it. If it's doing more research, so be it. You know, you just can't have less. So
you just have to look at the minimal log requirements for ABOS, and our residents end up with much more optimal experience.
Maybe it could be part of the osteopathic recognition requirements.
Well, I know. Here's the thing: is something that Tree said very early on. If this group brings up a policy and says that anyone that's within this group, we've decided to move forward, and you have to go to AOAO meetings, and we maintain that thing. They don't have to agree with this, but, you know, the hell with them.
John, jump the gun. Let's vote on it. Vote, or do we want to wait for another meeting?
Send out the Survey Monkey for Chuck. Send out the Survey Monkey first before we start
All
voting
right.
on anything.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We'll solve it later.
Just add that to this question.
That group of core requirements of the meetings that were when we had the AOA was really good. And whoever said it, I just haven't told the residents no. And I'm going to keep it on my budget. Whoever said that, was that Greg? I'm just going to keep it on my budget and make them go to it. And we have, what is it, a fourth year or fifth year, I think?
Fourth year.
Yeah. So I think if you just keep it there and tell them, you know, and like Brent just said, if we sort of quasi mandate it, it's our identity, you know? So anyway, I think it's a great meeting. I think it's the best money spent sometimes.
Amen.
Amen.
Agreed.
All right. Any other discussions you guys want to jump in, Steve?
Chuck, this is Rick Miller in Toledo.
Oh, hey, Rick.
Hey, I would love to see this group get together more often.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Wear a mask.
So along those lines of what Rick just said, should we meet in 2 weeks, and then we work out the Survey Monkey, and let Dr. Daniels and I work something out, and throw some stuff. We're gonna call tomorrow, and then we'll throw it to you, Chuck, and then anybody else who wants to be involved. But do you want to set up a meeting in 2 weeks?
Let me talk with Joy, make sure she can get a Zoom meeting going in a couple of weeks. Be happy to put it out there. I think the discussion's been great, and we'll probably come up with more things to talk about. So I'll get a hold of Joy, and we'll try to set up a future date then. That sounds great.
Great. Thank you for setting it up.
You bet.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Chuck.
Stay healthy, everybody.
Everybody,
Good meeting. Good meeting, guys.
Everyone be
Thanks,
safe.
Chuck.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck.
You're welcome.
Be safe.
See you, Chuck. Thanks.
Safe, guys.